Hey guys, welcome to the Dawg House Podcast. College football season is right around the corner, and I cannot wait. So excited. Got a special new guest, Jon Tweets Sports, and he's also on the Dawgs Dispatch on YouTube. We talk about fall and scrimmage intel, Kirby Smart. He's worrying about Clemson. We'll talk about that. Also, 2024 bold predictions for Georgia and college football. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share the podcast. And as always, thanks so much. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Dawg House Podcast. Got a great special new guest, Jon Tweets Sports from Dawgs Dispatch. Also, he's partnering with Coach Hayes from last week, a couple weeks ago. Pleasure to have you on, Jon. How you doing today?
Hey, Trey. Thanks for having me on, man. I'm really excited. Doing very well. Excited for football season. We are bearing down on another fantastic fall, and I can't wait.
Yeah, less than 20 days. It's right around the corner. Also, saw on your Twitter there that you were washing your hats. Is that one of your freshly clean hats? I thought that was awesome.
No, this is one. So this one actually stays pretty clean because I don't wear it when I hike or when I do the yard or when I'm running kids around. So. But I have about 5 or 6 that I have to end up. I have a soaking method that you can find on Twitter if that's of interest to you. And so I do that once a year. Really, I mean, around this time in August. I live in Atlanta. It's right. It's all the summer in the hat. So we're getting ready for fall, and those are all clean now. So hopefully we'll see one of those on the Dawg Dispatch. You can see one of my clean hats. Maybe I'll give you a little tutorial over there.
There you go. That's a nice little cleaning hack there. You're ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, jumping right into it. Fall camp is slowly trending down or about to end. So they just had one of their scrimmages, and I listened to Kirby Smart's post conference. Of course, he was kind of salty as usual. I think he was saying something like, "This is the least amount of depth they've had." I think he was yelling at him on the microphone that this is one of the softest he's had. So, you know how Kirby is. He wants perfection. Is this coach speak, or maybe it's just those players were hot out there? I'm sure it was hot in Athens on Saturday. Or what was your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a little bit of both. I think there's clearly Kirby Smart is the master of coach speak. I mean, he is a guy who he will tell you injuries are a good example. Like Kirby Smart will tell you he's hopeful to have somebody back on Saturday when he knows that person probably won't be back for 4 or 5 weeks. I mean, he's such a good guy at keeping players motivated, keeping things moving, keeping the conversation, controlling the conversation. What I will say is I do think that there is a combination of a little bit of Kirby, trying to motivate the team, trying to get these guys mentally motivated. And I think there's some truth to the depth. I mean, this is a team that they didn't make the college football playoff. It's a team that's probably younger in terms of experience than Kirby Smart is used to or has had in a number of years, especially with the transfer portal and with guys who have gone to the NFL. And then I also think, there are some guys that are banged up. If you look at the center position, that's a really good example where you got Jared Wilson, who is banged up, and there's not a lot of depth behind him. There's Drew Bobo, and Tate Ratledge has been taking some snaps at center. So I do think that there's a combination of both. I will say I think Kirby getting on the mic talking about people being soft and talking about all that stuff is probably more Kirby trying to motivate this team than the actual softness of the team, though. I mean, he's going to tell he told the 2022 team before they went 15-0 that they hadn't done anything. And they're coming off a national championship, and so this is a guy who is certainly a good motivator. But I do think Georgia fans should perk your ears up. There's a little bit of truth to what he's saying about the depth for sure, especially in the season that Georgia has coming and how long this season could potentially be. It's going to be a tough one for sure.
It is. I think he tries to play that psychological warfare with him. Anything to motivate him. He probably gets that from Coach Saban, so I'm sure that's part of it.
Well, you had Nolan Smith saying people thought we were going to go 7-5. I mean, Nolan Smith didn't wake up and hear people saying Georgia's going to go 7-5. He heard his head coach all year saying stuff to try to motivate him. So he's really good at that for sure.
Yeah, and on the depth, I believe they're a little banged up at D-line, so that's something as Clemson game gets closer to look at. So I think that's some value there.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the scrimmage, looks like some names coming out. I've heard, of course, everybody's been talking about Nate Frazier turning heads. I know he didn't get to come in the spring. I think I was reading on track guy from California. I think it's the same high school as JT Daniels. I think he ran like a 10.7, which that's flying. Also, I was hearing things from Nitro Tuggles kind of coming in his own, and Arian Smith. So I just wanted to see if you've heard anything from the spring game on Saturday.
I've heard the scrimmage. Yeah, I've heard those names for sure. I think on the offensive side of the ball, Nate Frazier is interesting because Kirby Smart did talk about him today in his press conference where he said he's got a lot to learn. He's not an early enrollee. He's a guy who showed up in the summer. And if you know about the running back position at Georgia, it's not just about what you do with the ball in your hands. You got to know pass protection. You got to be able to pass block. You got to be able to do a lot of the other things, the peripheral things, besides just making plays with the ball in your hands. But I have heard that, he's a guy who he's been in the offense for a number of years. He knows the route tree. He knows what he has to do. His thing is just, as Mike Bobo said, consistency. And so getting him the ball, being able to do things that are disruptive of the ball, running sweeps like he did in the scrimmage. There's, he showed some good things with the ball in his hands and was able to break some tackles. He seems to be more physical. He's a guy who was a track guy, and he actually stopped running track to focus on football. And so hopefully that comes through with Arian Smith because Georgia's definitely going to need him for sure.
Yeah, he's one of the most explosive players not at Georgia in the SEC, and I think everybody always remembers long touchdown for Ohio in the Ohio State game. Mm-hmm. And I know he had a little bit of the drops, and he's had some injuries. So hopefully this will be a senior year. He's kind of get it together, and I think they're really going to give him a look. The Nate Frazier I'm excited about. Nitro Tuggle's a young guy, so that'll be adding more depth. So, and then also I was going to ask, it looks like Gunnar Stockton's kind of cementing himself as backup quarterback. Is that what you've heard as well?
I mean, that's what I've heard, but I don't know. With Gunnar, is interesting, right? It's like who else would it be? Yeah. Jaden Rashada just showed up. Ryan Puglisi just showed up. So I think Gunnar has cemented himself more because of just his experience in the offense. He knows he has the head knowledge. But I do think he's got some work to do because I do think Jaden Rashada in particular and Ryan Puglisi when he's fully healthy, I think those two guys can definitely play, man. But I think in this, when you're going into the 2024 season, if Carson Beck, God forbid, gets hurt in the Clemson game, it's going to be Gunnar Stockton, and I think Georgia fans could feel really good about that. I think Gunnar Stockton, he's a guy that can make some plays. He's a guy that knows the offense. He's a guy that Mike Bobo trusts. Mike Bobo's dad actually taught Gunnar Stockton how to throw a football. So they have a long relationship and a long trust that has been built between Gunnar and the Bobos. And so I think Georgia fans can feel really good about Gunnar if anything were to happen to Carson Beck.
Yeah, he's definitely been there a while. He's been through the system. He's got some experience. I think mop-up duty pretty good bit against Florida State. He runs really well. I always looked at him as kind of like a little mini Tim Tebow.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be terrible, if Carson Beck gets hurt. But his long season, got a good O-line that can protect him. So we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And hopefully Georgia fans will not need our sponsor of the show coming up from any kind of stress or anything. But a great sponsor of the shows, Viva Tequila, seltzer.com, 0 carbs, 0 sugar, great for tailgate. They were great at some of the barbecues I went to and the pool this year, but 20% off, Dawg House 20 for 20% off. Great sponsor of the show. Also, they just had a brand new flavor that came out, coconut flavor.
Yo.
So again, that's 0 carbs, 0 sugar. My personal favorite is the watermelon. So great sponsor of the show, and they'll go with us into the season coming up.
Awesome. We're gonna use those as celebratory drinks, not
exactly
not to wash away the pain. Yeah, to enjoy the victory, not to wash away the pain.
That's correct. Also wanted to ask, so top 25 AP poll, which can't ever really look too much into this, pretty similar to the coaches poll, but Georgia's at number 1. Wanted to get your thoughts on that and Georgia's brutal schedule coming up. And was there any surprises maybe that you saw on the AP top 25 poll?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue with Georgia at number 1. I would say, there is the dreaded curse of the number 1 that people talk about, where it's 2004 to win a national championship after being AP 1. So 18 of the last 20 one. So there, Georgia, if you're looking for some Munsoning, maybe the thing. But say, for me, I'm a little surprised. Number one through 3, I think they've got the top 3 right.
Right.
I think 4 through 8. I don't know. Penn State, I'm just not a believer in James Franklin. I do think LSU is at 13, and I think LSU will be a top 10 team this year. But I think that 4 through 8, if you threw LSU up there, moved Penn State down, I think you could probably shuffle that order really however you want. And I think that's where that'll shake out. One thing I thought was interesting in Washington. So Washington, obviously a ton of transfers, lost Kalen DeBoer, all these things. And Washington is not ranked in the top 25. They played for a national championship last year. I know they have Michael Penix Jr. I know, all of these things, but it is interesting how Georgia fans, it's like, I don't know that we realize how good we really have it, where our team consistently now is in the top every year in the polls. And you got a team that played for a national championship last year that lost their coach, lost half their team, not even ranked in the top 25. And teams like Kansas are, and so I think that's something that stood out to me, was just when you look at the nature of college football, just for Georgia fans in particular. I mean, it feels good, man. There's been a lot of years where this thing came out and you're like, I don't know, are we, is 4 that too high? I mean, there's been a lot where you really had, and now it feels very good to see Georgia at number 1 and be like, I mean, make the argument that Georgia's not number 1, and it's very hard to make that argument. So, but overall, I like Georgia. I like Ohio State. I like Oregon. I honestly think it's going to come down to those 3 teams in the end. And then I think, clearly I think Texas will play a part in there somewhere. But yeah, don't sleep on LSU. I think a lot of people are sleeping on them because of losing Jaden Daniels and what happened on defense last year. But they got a whole new defensive staff from Stoll, Missouri's defensive coordinator. They got a really good. I mean, I think LSU is going to be a lot better than people are giving them credit for right now.
Yeah, and then you're finally giving. Was it Brian Kelly's 3rd year, I believe? Giving him his 3rd year with the team. I mean, and, he won at Notre Dame. He's always been a winner, so I think give him a little time. Yeah, I
think he's a guy that I think that last year I think people were. Again, I think the LSU defense was just so bad last year that people are like, you can't fix that in a year. And I don't know. I think LSU is going to surprise some folks, and I would probably put them up in the top, 6 or 7 personally.
And then speaking of that, I was going to ask any bold statements, either in college football, maybe from some of these teams, or with Georgia, you would like to maybe make any bold statements.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I don't know how old it is. I'll give you 3 of them though. I think Oregon is gonna win the Big Ten in their first year.
Wow.
I think they're gonna beat Ohio State. I think Dan Lanning has learned a lot. He's in his 3rd year. I think Oregon is gonna be coming in, at number 2, maybe even number 1 in the college football playoff rankings. I think Georgia. I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say it with my chest because I believe it. I do think Kirby Smart is going to make it 4 years in a row with an undefeated regular season with the toughest schedule that Georgia has probably had, maybe ever. Because I think that Georgia, even with being on the road, even with depth issues, even with those things, I don't think Texas is going to be as good as people say they are. Kalen DeBoer, I don't think people realize how difficult it is to install a brand new staff from top to bottom with 30-something transfers and everything else into a program, even in Alabama. I just think that that's a very tough task. And so I think if you look at those two things, I think Georgia's going to go undefeated in the regular season. So those are two. The third one I'll say is I do think, and people are going to come at me for this. I think Notre Dame is going to play a part in this 12-team playoff. I don't know that they're going to be, I think they're going to beat somebody. I think Notre Dame is going to win a college football playoff game this year, and I think people are going to be really surprised because a lot of people are kind of, punting Notre Dame at 7. They're saying they're too high. So all these things. I think Notre Dame's going to make some noise this year.
I like all those. Yeah, I'm gonna go with you on that. I guess one of my big bold statements is I agree with you. Kalen DeBoer coming in and all the hype, and it's so hard to replace the GOAT, Nick Saban. And I said this earlier in the summer. I think they go around 9-3, miss the SEC championship game, and go to some like Outback Bowl or one of those. I just think it's just so hard to build a culture, brand new coach. I know he's still got all the recruits and everything. And I think with Milroy, I think they're going to kind of figure him out a little bit. I know he's a great athlete, can run around, but I think maybe even Michigan kind of showed the blueprint to kind of beat him. So I'm going to go. That's my bold statement. Also, on the Georgia side is, I believe Dominique Lovett is going to be a 1,000-yard receiver, first one since I think 2001.
Yeah, there you go.
I just think he's going to get a lot of catches, a lot of touches. So I think he's going to have a chance to finally get in that 1,000-yard receiving mark since Terrence Edwards. And then I think Ohio State, just because they don't have that number one quarterback with like Will Howard, I believe. I think they're going to take a little bit of a step back. I think they made the playoff because it's top 12, but I think they're a little disappointing. Even with all the transfer portal people they brought in, I just think maybe they take a step back and then maybe gets a little heat on Ryan Day. But
I like it. Yeah, I like it. I think Ohio State. I don't know, man. When you're going into a season like this with their schedule, where you have to go 2 and you got to play Michigan again. You got just a whole different conference. Not having a transfer coordinator. I've been around this game a long. It's people just take for granted how hard it really is to instill new coaches, new terminology, all those things. In Georgia, you promoted Mike Bobo, who was Todd Monken in that national championship run 2022 when Georgia set all these records on offense, and you still had challenges. I mean, that's just happens when you have new guys on the headset room. And I think that's going to be a really tough thing to overcome for teams like Ohio State and Alabama in particular.
All right, sure. I agree with all that. And then I know you kind of already touched on it a little bit, but Georgia's schedule, going to bring up brutal schedule, and looking at that, all those rankings, 3 of them are in the top 6. You're going to have playing number 14 with Clemson. The first one, and then also number 15, Tennessee. Of course, a lot of things can change by the time they play all those teams. But what would be some of the challenges? I know you said earlier, kind of previewed it, 12-0.
Yeah.
So, what would be the toughest ones?
Yeah, I mean, I think the toughest ones. I think when you look at this schedule, right? So I think Georgia has a couple things going in their favor in their tough. People will say clearly at Alabama, at Texas. Maybe at Ole Miss, but people will say, those, when you just look at rankings and the quality of teams, those might be your toughest. At Alabama, you come there off a bye week. When you go to Texas plays Oklahoma in the Red River rivalry the week before. So those are 2 things that I think do play a big part in Georgia's favor, because Texas coming off their biggest game of the year, their biggest rivalry, and Georgia having Mississippi State at home, I think is a big advantage for Georgia. But when I look at this, I mean, I do think there are some trap games, right? Like I think at Kentucky is going to be a tough game. I think it's going to be a war. It's early in the season. It's a night game. It's the kind of game that Mark Stoops is just good enough to muck up. And and be real physical. I think that one's going to be a tough game. I think Clemson, just because I think Clemson, I don't think this will be a repeat of Oregon and Georgia in 2022. I think Clemson, they're really good on defense. They're really physical. I think that'll be a tough game. And then I will say, I'm going to say this, and it pains me, but depending on how things go, I think Tennessee could be a tougher game for once, finally, maybe in a few years, than Georgia fans are giving it credit for, because I do think Tennessee will have a better quarterback than they've had the last couple times that Georgia's played them, and I do think Tennessee will have a better defense than they've had the last couple times Georgia played them. So those would be the three I'd watch out for, which is Kentucky, Clemson, and Tennessee, the ones that are just maybe a little bit off the radar from Texas, Alabama, and Ole Miss.
Yeah, completely agree on all those. I'm gonna go ahead and take a little bit of a step back, just because it's so hard to go 12-0, and then it's such a brutal schedule.
It's brutal.
And then just if you can say anything for Georgia this year, stay healthy. I mean, they're deep. Kirby knows that. But I'm gonna kind of take a step back. I'm gonna go around that 11-1, 10-2. Yep. And I think the Texas game, I agree with you coming off that, but it's just so hard to go on the road. And then that Ole Miss game is sneaky in Oxford, probably going to be a night game. It's just so hard to go with those three ranked top 6 teams on the road without maybe stubbing your toe. But with that said, you could even maybe go 10-2, miss the SEC championship game. To me, SEC championship game is almost like getting less irrelevant because it's a marathon this year. You want to get to the playoffs. So, hey, even if you could, rest the legs and, sit that one and still get maybe that, 6th, 7th seed, get a home game, get hot, get healthy at the end. So,
yeah. And, and it's hard to argue with that. I say 12-0 just because I look at, like I just said, where things fall, where a bye week falls, where a Texas rivalry game falls, those types of things. But clearly it has to do with health. It has to do with, there's a number of things. And especially you get down in the end of the season, right? And I mean, if you're Kirby Smart, and he said this with, on Paul Feinbaum earlier this year, that a lot of coaches are doing, they're having a lot of conversation around how you're going to manage your roster. They're having a lot of conversation around, do you rest guys? Do you, maybe change your personnel to keep guys healthy? You start doing those types of things, especially if you get down and you're, you've gone through and maybe you're, 6-0, 7-0, maybe you've got a couple of those big wins. Do you change the way you manage the games going into a playoff where you might end up having to play 2 or 3 games? And on the flip side, if you go 10-2 and you miss the SEC championship game, well, you get a home game for your first round of the playoffs. So there's it's not a, it's a, in some ways, there's not a real way to lose unless you lose enough to just miss the playoff in general. But if you're Georgia, the games that you're most likely to lose are probably still going to keep you in that top, 5 to 7 teams, which will keep you, hosting a playoff game in that first round, which again is, there's a lot of advantage to having a playoff game in Athens for sure. Missing the SEC championship game and having a playoff game in Athens, there's a lot of benefit to that.
Yeah, I would love that. It's almost like it's like I mentioned before, it's not a sprint. And then SEC championship game, if it makes you in the top 4 and you get a bye week, I could see about it. But it's one of those where you don't really move up that much with the seeding. You got to play an extra game, and you get some guys banged up.
And let's just unpack that real quick. I mean, I don't understand. So you can go 12-0, and your prize is that you get to play a 13th game. That if you win that game, you get a bye week, and then you get to play in an NFL stadium for your first playoff game.
Right.
If you lose that game, you turn around and have to host, a good team on your campus for a playoff game, and you don't have a bye week. Versus if you just don't play the game at all, then you get to host, you get a bye week and you get to host somebody at your campus. So it does. I've studied this and tried to find a way for it to make sense. And I'm like, man, I don't know. What's your reward for, going undefeated and playing in that game, or losing one game and playing in that game? It's like, you got to go out there and beat each other up in hopes that you get a bye week. And then if you lose the game, you don't. versus if you just don't make the game at all, you get a built-in bye week and you get to host the game. And so I think they've got a little backwards. Hopefully they'll fix it when they do some of the expansion around. It's like, I just think your reward for going through a league unblemished should definitely be you either get to host a playoff game automatically, or there is a built-in bye somewhere there for you. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to have to go play a championship game with there's only a loss on the other side for you. There's no real win. Yeah. So
yeah, it's definitely an interesting year being first year 12-team playoffs, but we'll help. The Dogs will help get the kinks out for sure.
Yeah, cool.
And then John, how we follow you on social media?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Jon Tweets Sports. That's where I post most of my stuff, so you can find me there. We're also on the Dawg Dispatch on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. That's me and Coach Hayes. At Coach Hayes Huddle, my good buddy. We do that show. And so, yeah, jump on. Would love to have you with us throughout the season. We're going to be putting out all kinds of content, and I'm excited to chat with you. Hopefully I can come back, and hopefully we'll have you on the Dawg Dispatch sometime, Trey.
Yeah, that'd be great. There it is, Dawg Dispatch. Check him out on Jon Tweets Sports. Him and Coach Hayes doing great film breakdowns and reviewing all things Georgia. Over 1,000 subscribers, which is always impressive.
Yeah, man, we appreciate the love. Most of it, candidly, is for Coach Hayes. He's an old school ball coach, Coach Lab McConkey and other people. I like listening to him talk. I learn a lot. So come over for Coach, and you can deal with me while you're over there.
Yeah, appreciate John coming on the Dawg House Podcast today. And if you stuck around, make sure to like, subscribe, share the Dawg House Podcast. We really appreciate it.